Good evening, and welcome to the City of Burbank Police Commission meeting for October 21st, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order and roll call, please.
Commissioner Chapman? Commissioner Chapman?
We can't hear him, but he's trying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner Elman? Is he saying yes? Is he acknowledging?
Commissioner Elman.
Okay. Chair Kobaisi
Present.
and Commissioner Vest?
Here.
Let's, for those of us in the chamber, would you please rise for the flag salute? All right. The first public comment period will be upcoming in a few minutes. To speak during that period, please call 818-238-3335. City staff will answer the phones and announce speakers in real time to the chair when public comment period begins. During this election season, we want to remind members of the public of some ground rules for speaking during the public comment period. Under the Brown Act and the Police Commission agenda, members of the public may comment on any item listed in the agenda or any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of this commission. As such, comments about the election, including comments about specific candidates, even for city offices, are not within the subject matter jurisdiction of this body. Except for identifying yourself as running for a particular office, if you speak about yourself as a candidate or speak about any other candidates, the chair will interrupt and remind you to confine your remarks to agenda items or something within the Police Commission's jurisdiction. Thank you. We'll start with commission announcements and reporting out by commission subcommittees. Are there any commissioners that need to make any announcements? I will make a couple. From our last meeting, I know that we talked about reaching out to the school district. I have done that. I spoke with Superintendent Dr. Matt Hill. He sent out a request that I wrote to students, staff, faculty, and parents throughout the district, and we are still receiving responses. We received a couple hundred responses already. I think we're still receiving some. So we'll wait, and hopefully we can agendize this topic for the next time to have a debate and discussion on it. In addition to that, there were some comments at the last meeting about seeing different aspects or viewpoints from outside groups and different groups beyond the presentations that we had here on the MET team. I also reached out then to the Deputy Director of LA County Mental Health and spoke with them about their interactions with the Burbank Police, and I want to report that they spoke very highly of the Burbank Police Department. I was told by them that our officers, 100% of the officers that we have here, have received the training from the Department of Mental Health through the county, and that was very nice to hear. They spoke very highly of the attendees. They said all of the people that come to training from Burbank are always very attentive. They listen. They ask all the right questions. So I think that we also should move that forward and put that on as a debate topic in our next meeting, so that we can take a vote on some of the recommendations that we had. And that's all I have to report at this point. Any other, I don't know if Mr. Chapman's back on, but any other comments from any commissioners? Okay. Seeing none, we will go to oral communication. Do we have any callers at this point? Okay. Okay. So there will be a second opportunity later on at the meetings for public comment. Again, the number is 818-238-3335. We will move on then to the next agenda item. Approval of the minutes from September 16th, 2020. Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion? I didn't see any motion for approval.
So moved.
That was Commissioner Cohen. Second?
Second.
Commissioner Elman seconds. Take a roll call on it. Or anybody have any problems with the agenda?
There.
Okay, we see it all then. Okay, then motion carries, it's fine. Okay. First item of business, we have a presentation by Lieutenant J.J. Puglisi about the implicit bias. Welcome, thank you. Please.
Okay, I'm happy to be here tonight to speak to you about implicit bias and bias-based policing. Next slide, please. I'm not biased, says just about anybody that's an average person. None of us wants to think that we're biased. Click, please. But the truth of that is that we probably all need a little bit of a paradigm shift. We need to examine where we're coming from. So in order to help us with that, let's take a look at some post-training that's provided to police officers. I've got a short clip here that's Captain Herb Taft from the San Diego Sheriff's Department. Next slide, please.
We all have biases, and they have been shaped and developed over time by a number of factors, such as our upbringing, our environment, and the media. What's important is recognizing biases exist and ensuring they don't control our perceptions and actions. Our biases are often implicit, meaning we may be unaware of them or mistaken about their nature. Implicit biases operate almost entirely at an unconscious level and can manifest themselves as attitudes or actions we may unknowingly exhibit towards other people. These biases can often be in conflict with our own sense of self and personal identity. And by recognizing biases, understanding them, and not acting on them, we will be better equipped to provide fair and unbiased enforcement of the law.
Next slide, please. So just to review, this is something that goes on unconsciously. We all don't want to believe that we have biases, but the reality is that from our upbringing to things that we've experienced in life, we all have impressions and attitudes, and we've heard stereotypes that are going to affect our actions and our decision making. And we may not even realize it, which is why we need to educate ourselves about the topic and why we need to make a concerted effort to recognize that those things may be going on in the background. Next slide, please. Now, specifically with respect to law enforcement, the danger of implicit bias comes in when we have protected groups in society, and the enforcement actions that we take can obviously have huge repercussions for individuals moving throughout their lives. So the California legislature has taken steps to make it clear to law enforcement that any sort of bias in policing is prohibited, and that's covered in Penal Code 13519.4, specifically subsection F. Next slide, please. In addition, the Burbank Police Department has specific policy covering bias-based policing. It prohibits it overall. It requires officers to have an articulable reason for why we stopped someone in the field, and to be able to not only know that ourselves, but to be able to explain it to the person that we've stopped so they have an understanding that they're being stopped for a legitimate purpose and not just for something that's based on one of those stereotypes or perceptions that the individual officer might have. In addition, if any concerns are brought up by those citizens during a contact, we are to call a supervisor to the scene. We will then advise the person that they're free to leave. They don't have to stay, but if they wish to stay and speak to a supervisor will be responding. We then formalize any citizen complaint regarding bias-based policing, and that's reported, all those complaints are reported to the Department of Justice on an annual basis. We conduct, as you know, we have body cameras, we used to have audio recorders, and we have an audits and inspections unit that regularly audits those contacts for the specific reason of identifying any concerns with regard to bias-based policing. And lastly, we have ongoing training that occurs. Next slide. Ongoing training that the department engages in. Initially, there's training provided to police officers in the basic police academy, and then we have training on an ongoing basis in order to reinforce those principles. Next slide. As the Commission's well aware, the Burbank Police Department is a CALIA accredited agency that requires us to go and undergo an outside audit by professionals in the law enforcement industry that evaluate us against a number of standards that have been set as best practices throughout the United States. And as part of that, they ensure that that training has been received by officers in the academy and that there is ongoing training at the department. The last training that we had with the Burbank Police Department was in June of 2020. Next slide. So the goal of all this is to work towards procedural justice. And procedural justice is basically an open line of communication with the community and specifically with the individuals that we contact in the field so that we are engaging them, we are explaining the reason, not just what we're doing, but the reasons behind what we're doing and the justification for that, so that we have an open line of communication and understanding and take away, hopefully, any perceptions that our actions are driven by bias. So what I have for you here is just a vignette that's presented as part of post-training for police officers that really enforces the ideal and goal of what we want to strive towards when we engage in procedural justice. Go ahead and click, please.
I knew I was going to get pulled over. What do you mean? I mean, I've been working all day. I'm just trying to get to the store, go home. But I'm a black man, wearing a hoodie. I knew I was screwed. I didn't know you were black when I stopped you. I was right across the intersection from you, and you rolled through the stop sign. Yeah, well, a lot of people do, but I feel like I'm the one who gets stopped all the time. Sorry you feel that way. I don't know why you may have been stopped before, but I can only tell you why I stopped you tonight. It's because you ran the stop sign, nothing else. You understand how scared I am when I get pulled over?
Tell me why you're scared.
Cops get nervous when they pull over a black guy. And I don't know how this is gonna end. I just don't want to get shot.
Okay. I get it. Then a lot of things cause a mistrust, but I never know what's going to happen either when I make a traffic stop. I want you to be able to trust the police, to trust me. I don't want you to be scared.
You're the first cop I've talked to that understands there's problems. And I think that maybe if I could talk to other cops like this, I don't know, I'd be less afraid.
We could all talk like this. Maybe everyone would be less afraid.
Will you remember this conversation when you come to my car? It matters. More than you know.
What's up, buddy? Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you. That's the final slide. So as you can see, especially at the end of the vignette, it touches on that our actions with an individual affect not just that individual, but you can see that there's a child in the back seat, and their perception and their view of the police is being shaped by our actions and that one contact. So when we can show patience, when we can communicate respect, the legitimate reason that we're stopping someone, it goes towards increasing that procedural justice, building more trust with the community, and just the training overall reinforces that any bias in policing is unacceptable with the Burbank Police Department. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Are there any questions? Any commissioners, do you have any questions for Lieutenant Puglisi? Anybody raise your hand if you want to ask something? Okay, there's no questions from any of the commissioners at home. I have a question for you. I think you heard, maybe I mentioned earlier that I reached out to the county and I spoke with their mental health deputy director. The 16 hours of training that you're referencing, is that the same 16 hours that they talked to me about, or is that in addition or different?
No, we have training specific to mental health and managing mental health crisis as well.
Okay, so are there any ties between the implicit bias training and mental health? Can you explain a little bit how some
Sure.
of that happens?
Yeah, there's definitely a component in the mental health training that specifically addresses the stigma associated with mental health and tries to dispel a lot of those myths that many people have heard, whether it's growing up or through their experiences or anything else, again, to ensure that we try to remove those biases when we're managing a mental health crisis in the field.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more. So this is the training that all the peace officers in the state receive, plus you have additional training you do in-house. And that only covers the officer's side. And I just want to make a point to all the public there that this is just the version that we're seeing here is what our officers receive. There's really nothing, no way for us to tell how the citizen reaction is to a traffic stop or any encounters with the police, because they don't get any type of bias training in general.
And well, that is something, that is one component that's addressed in our community academy. Unfortunately, right now, with everything going on with the COVID crisis, we haven't been able to conduct those. But we also recently brought in a group to do some training for, some pilot training for officers with respect to just that issue, in doing a better job of educating the public in general on why we do what we do before it gets to the contact phase. And the better job that we can do that with the public, particularly our youth, the better we're going to set ourselves up in society to reduce these types of conflict in the future.
So I think maybe this is a question either you can answer or the chief could answer. Do we have anything on our website right now, or anywhere where a citizen could go and find out what to expect or how to handle themselves in a traffic stop? I think at least if they know what to expect when they encounter a police officer. Is there anything like that?
Let me just make a couple of remarks at the outset. Number one is that bias policing is a big deal with us. We are not Johnny-come-lately. When you look at when we enunciated our policy that Lieutenant Puglisi has already referenced, we've been practicing this for a while, and we've taken advantage of every training opportunity there. Our policies, including implicit bias, is on our website, and all I can say is that just be reasonable and listen to the officer as he or she gives commands or makes requests. But this is something that we talk about at roll calls as frequently as possible, because what we try to do is take incidents around the country where things have not gone well, and then talk to our officers about, hey, how would you have approached this situation to have a better outcome? So I would encourage folks watching to take a look on the website at the policy itself. You can always contact us if you've got comments about that, or submit them to our website. And what I'd like to also do is we've just completed some additional training here in the last couple of weeks, but if Chief Albanese could come up and just talk about one other aspect of this type of training, I would appreciate it.
Great. Chief Albanese. Thank you, Lieutenant Puglisi.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mike Albanese, Deputy Chief. So the training that we went through, and actually Lieutenant Puglisi did the heavy lifting to get the training for us, and it's called Why'd You Stop Me? So it's probably some of the best training that we have received. There's a sergeant from Long Beach, a retired Long Beach supervisor, and also a civilian that participates in the training who has a very, very powerful testimonial about being a victim and having contacts with law enforcement, and her testimonial about her plight, and a police officer who just asked her what's going on, changed her life. But it's specific to the engagements like we saw in the vignette with the post-training, is that you have someone who is driving who has a perception, officer doesn't know him, vehicle driver doesn't know the officer, and how you work through all of that. Some of the wordsmithing associated with that, so at the end of the contact, is that you're building a relationship. With the understanding, too, is that you also have some folks that are difficult, will be difficult, probably die difficult, and how to navigate that. But the majority of the folks that we have contact with are maybe the first time they've been exposed to a police contact, or there is a need for the police, could be involved in a crisis, just how to navigate that professionally so that there is a good outcome. So we did a lot of research as an organization. In fact, Lieutenant Puglisi not only found these folks, he and Adam Cornels, but also we put together some other training. When I say we, the Cops Bureau and Lieutenant Puglisi, as far as engaging with folks that are difficult and officer comportment during those interactions. And again, it's a real small percent, but it still is essential that our comportment, managing ourselves while managing incident, is essential. That help you out?
Yes.
And it was great training. I sat through the training, 8 hours of training, 10 hours of training, post-training. The training is so well thought of that Post made it certified post-training and give the training high marks. In fact, we did, there was a survey done after the training, and it was high 80 percentile bracket as far as the value of the training, which is pretty high for law enforcement folks.
Great. Thank you so
You
much.
got it.
Thank you.
You know, if you could add, we learn new stuff all the time, and I learned something tonight. So the question was posed about having a video or something on our website. So at one time we did, but I think we need to revisit that and maybe get something that is really contemporary and realistic. So I will work with Sergeant Green on that. But the public needs to understand that from time to time, we're going to make mistakes, and if we do, we're going to acknowledge those mistakes and then feed that information, glean from those contacts back into our training processes so that we don't make the same mistake again. But the crux of the matter is that when you have a contact with an officer, you should not be argumentative at scene. But our officers are reasonable, and hopefully people can react in a reasonable fashion. If there's a complaint as a result of that contact, that's an entirely separate matter. But what we don't do is try to adjudicate matters on the street. And I know that sometimes is hard to say to people, but our officers try to be reasonable, and we hope that the public is reasonable. And as soon as the danger is over, sometimes there's that perceived danger. And I think you heard the officer on the video articulate that to the individual that he stopped. But those are the types of things that we need to get worked out. And it doesn't always come quickly. We try to ensure that it does, but sometimes it doesn't. But listen to the officer, do as he or she says, and it should work out. But again, I like that whole idea of something on our website for the public. So that's something that we'll take a look at. Thank you.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, I think we use this term a lot, de-escalation, when we talk about police action, and I think that applies to both sides, citizens as well as I think when our encounters with police officers, as a citizen, we should be mindful that we have a responsibility to de-escalate as well. And if we want to hold the officer to that, then we need to participate with that. It's a kind of a two-way street. So thank you for doing that. Our next...
let me add one thing I've forgotten, and that is that the Office of Independent Review, when we have some type of an allegation like this, they review our investigations as well. So that's kind of a oversight on our oversight of the investigative matter that we have had. So I think that is something that should be reassuring to the community, that there is truly an outside neutral party that reviews how we've responded to these types of situations.
Thank you. The next item up is to discuss and determine topics to be addressed.
Mr. Chair. Mr.
Sorry.
Chair.
Oh, any questions?
I think
Sorry.
there's a
Sorry.
couple of questions here.
Oh, sorry about that. Commissioner Chapman, any other commissioners have any questions? Okay, I see a couple. Okay, Commissioner Chapman, go ahead.
Yeah. Great. I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I'm looking at the 3-page sheet with policies that we were given,
And under number 402.6 about administration, it talks about an annual report. And that report is given to the chief of police. And it mentions that it does not include any identifying information regarding a specific complaint, the public or officers. And I'm wondering, is that report available to the commission or the public?
So
I've got another one or two too.
So that report would be an internal audit report that would not be released to for the public. That would be just a confidential audit of our processes and our procedures. Certainly, that's something that OIR could review and report out on, but the report itself would be something that's more of an internal nature.
Even though, I'm just wondering if there is no identifying information on there as far as who was involved or the officer, is there no way that we can find out at least the number of situations that have arisen?
Well, those statistics, as it's stated in the policy, Commissioner, those are reported to the Department of Justice with California, so they would have all those statistics.
But the police commission doesn't get any information about that, nor the general public in Burbank.
Yeah, the question with respect to the police commission having access to that, that's probably something that's more of a city attorney question as to the legality of sharing that information.
Would Ms. O like to say something here?
Oops.
I don't think she's on with us here.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Oh, can you see me? Okay, hopefully you can hear me as well. I would not want to comment right now on the confidentiality or of the document because I don't know enough information about what it is, how it was processed, on what basis it was processed, whether it falls under any protected categories or whether it would be in fact subject to the Public Records Act and therefore available to the community as well as to the commission. It's something that I would have to look further into as to whether or not it is material that should be released under the Public Records Act.
Appreciate your answer, but I'm looking at the it's part of the policy for 402.6 that says that there is no identifying information to be put in the report.
I understand that, and it very well could be.
I think that we could instill more trust by knowing that if there was an issue that was being addressed, we don't even know if there is an issue or not.
That's understood, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily something that could not be released. What I'm saying is that I'm not going to render an opinion on it tonight. But that is certainly something that could be looked into.
Further down, and I'm not sure if this is a question for Ms. O here, in the same policy number 402.6, it talks about the supervisor of the department employees who regularly interact should review the annual report and discuss it. Is that actually done?
So the answer, commissioners.
So, but I'm just asking it. Yeah.
So yes, Commissioner. The answer is that any employees where this would come up as a concern, that would be shared with the direct supervision and chain of command of that particular employee, and those issues would be addressed and continually monitored for any future concerns.
I may add that we don't wait for this report to determine if we have a problem or not, but as a part of our intake of public complaints, if everything is put into an automated database And if we see a pattern of allegations building with an employee, then what we do is intervene at that time as a part of just good supervision and management.
So Commissioner, just to tag on to what the chief is saying, obviously if you had a specific incident where there was a sustained allegation of any sort, that would be addressed immediately with an employee. But it's also in our policy regarding the evaluation of employees that when the employee has their evaluation, the supervisor pulls the data from the IA Pro system to see if there are any issues or patterns of concern, and that's all documented in the employee's evaluation and addressed with them at that time as well.
So at some point from an internal affairs investigation, the city manager would be notified, but none of the police commission or the public.
Again, internal affairs investigations other than those that are subject to disclosure under the recently passed legislation would be considered confidential and would not be released for public view.
Quick interjection here. That would be covered under POBAR, correct, Lieutenant?
Yes, ma'am.
If I could just try to clarify something here. I'm not sure, Commissioner Chapman, if you're wondering about the actual, I hear the question about data, that you're concerned about the numbers of alleged violations or founded, unfounded, investigated. Is that what I'm understanding? You want to know if we have the complaints, if we get them, and what's in that report that goes to the chief? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah, it would be so that we have, we get zero transparency as far as being able to know if there is an issue or not.
Okay,
We
if
don't
I
know
could,
anything
if I could
as
just,
part of the commission or
you know,
as part of the public.
I think we could get that data, and correct me if I'm wrong, from the DOJ report. Is it not the same data that gets reported annually to the Department of Justice?
It is, and if I can also add that when OIR does their review, any allegations of bias-based policing, any of them, are reviewed during their review. So those would be in that publicly available report from OIR.
So the data does come out.
It's just our internally generated audit wouldn't be available for public release, but any bias-based policing allegations that the department has investigated would be reviewed by OIR and addressed in that publicly available report.
As well as the DOJ report that anybody can go online and get, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does that clarify anything for you, Commissioner Chapman? I mean, I'm thinking the data is available. It's just not available out of that particular document because it's internal. It's available through the California Department of Justice because they have to report that same data, which we could just download. Does that make sense?
If I can interject here for a second. If we were a different type of commission, like as in the city of LA, we have the rights to that information, but since we are not, we don't have the rights to that information because it's protected under POBAR. Lieutenant, am I correct under that?
There is certain information that's protected under POBAR, but that's why I think that the best course of action is to have the city attorney examine the report, the contents of it, and weigh in at some later time as to whether it's appropriate or not for that to be disclosed in that manner.
So, Commissioner Chapman, can we get back to you on an answer with that? Maybe I think I heard the city attorney's office say that they would look into it and then let us know.
Is that something that Ms. O would be able to report back on at next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. That would be perfect.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioner Chapman?
No, but this topic is certainly very interesting. It brings to mind the importance of the words that we said at the beginning of the meeting in the pledge, when it says "with justice for all." And we want to make sure that everybody, both in our police department and in our public, get a complete and unbiased justice, equal justice.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Commissioner Ellman, I believe you had some questions?
Yes. Just a quick question about the training and the video that was shown to us. In today's world, there seems to be a lot of situations where the police officer is conversing with the person that they pulled over, and it seems as if the anxiety and tension comes from the spectators, not the two of them. I wonder if you just talk a little about that on what it's like when the spectators become more of an issue than the suspects.
So constitutionally, folks have a right to express their opinion to a certain extent, as long as they're not interfering with the performance of our official duties. And I think that because of the level of training and the robust policies that we have, and just their knowledge of constitutional law, that most officers are able to filter that out and tune that out and focus on the issue at hand with the violator. But it certainly goes to the training that we discussed earlier as far as the "why'd you stop me?" And I think that law enforcement nationwide, we could probably all do a better job in educating the public just about the things that we do, why we do the things that we do. And you're always going to have some folks that, no matter what, are going to be resistant or maybe anti-police. But largely, I think that we can make strides in bringing more people to a common understanding of the things that we do, and perhaps as we move forward into the future, reduce some of that outside influence on a stop that we may be making out in the field, whether it's a traffic stop or an individual pedestrian stop.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, commissioners?
Good job, JJ.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Cohen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Lieutenant.
Well, I'd like to make one clarifying comment. The department will work with the city attorney on the presentation next month. But I think everybody needs to understand that we are as transparent as you're going to find in this profession. There are encumbrances. Officers have rights. And, I don't know of anybody else that routinely has OIR come in and take a look at all their bias policing cases. But we're able to connect the dots if we have a problem child, if you will, out there. But I don't want people to think that we're hiding bad officers or not wanting to identify them. The law does not permit us to do that. Officers have rights too. But we have been as transparent as is humanly possible. So that's why we will work with the city attorney to make a presentation about the state of the law, the types of information that by law has to be reported to the Attorney General. But we enunciated a policy long before it was in vogue. So that is something I hope that the department and its members would get credit for, because we are trying to be transparent. But we're not going to sit here and dissect each and every case where there is an allegation of bias-based policing. We just can't do that. This is not the proper forum. The law does not permit us to do that. But we've got enough oversight with neutral third parties to objectively look at the investigations and the decisions that we've arrived at.
Thank you, Chief. So this next topic is the time when we determine what topics we'll be discussing in the upcoming meetings that we have, and we have some ongoing agenda items. Before we actually open for additional items, I wanted to remind the commission that we had already taken a segment of issues we wanted to cover, and that we have, committed to giving recommendations to the city council by the end of the year or early, next year on some of those items. So please keep that in mind when you want to add an agenda item. I'd like to start off by requesting that we add 2 agenda items, or I don't know if we can do it as one, but really to go over we had a presentation on the SROs, we've taken in information from the public, and we also had the Met team presentation that we need to have some conclusion on. So maybe if we could agendize those 2 topics for discussion and recommendation at the next meeting, that would be appropriate. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but I think we have to start wrapping up some of those things. Commissioner Ellman?
Yeah, at the beginning of this meeting, Mr. Chairman, you said that hundreds of emails or comments have been received from parents in the BUSD concerning the SROs. And I've only seen like 7 emails. Are they being shared with us, or what's the status of those?
Yes, they were shared. I think the bulk of them were shared in one email to a link where you could go and download them off of a cloud. I don't know, maybe if you didn't get that, I'd be happy to have that sent to you.
No, I
again.
got that. I saw that. I just wanted to verify we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yes.
there's a couple, there's over 100 in there, I believe. There's probably, if I remember correctly, in that one email, there's like 174. But I've printed them all out, so I'm glad to, scan them and send them to you if you want to read them that way.
Now, I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about the same ones. It's clear now. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, any agenda items? Do we want to vote on what I've proposed, or do you want to add any additional ones? Commissioner Vest?
So you basically want to agendize discussing the SRO program?
As a single item, and the
emails that we received, kind of what our recommendation is going to be to city council?
Yeah, we want to decide what we're going to forward. At least we can get 2.
So I will second that.
Okay, so are we bundling them, the Met team and the SRO program discussion, or are we going to do them as separate items?
I think we should make them separate, just because there's
Okay.
2
so-
very different subjects.
So then the motion for the first one is to discuss and debate and come up with a recommendation on the SRO program.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second and a vote. All in favor?
Second.
I think everybody here indicated they're in favor, so that'll carry. And the second item is the Met team. Discussion, debate, and recommendation to city council on that as well.
Sorry, Commissioner Kabasi.
Yes.
Sorry. Are we discussing the continuation of that, or recommendations on the continuation of that?
Well, we had some members of the public wanting to decouple it from the
Right.
police department, so we're going to debate that and come up with a recommendation of what to do, whether to keep
Got
it, decouple it.
Yes, okay, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a second on that one. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I don't see anybody opposed. That motion carries as well. And now, if you have any other items, if I've missed anything that we've covered before that you want to agendize also for debate and discussion and recommendation, now's the time. Seeing none, I guess that'll be the only 2. We're going to keep the other items that we've been going over on as a rolling agenda items. And then hopefully I see one from Commissioner Ellman. Commissioner Elman, your mic's not on.
Thank you. Maybe we can ask our council liaison that the report that we're going to give them on some of the issues we're discussing, what is their timeline? When would they like to receive it from us?
So we can find that information out for you. It doesn't have to be a formal agenda item, but we can certainly give you more information about when council would like you to come back with a report. Obviously, these are interesting times, and this is not the best way to conduct meetings through the internet. I don't know about anybody else, but everyone's voice has been cutting in and out on my end. Also, you don't have to vote on it, but I will come back with an analysis and an opinion as to the report that Commissioner Chapman asked about, as to whether or not it's something that is subject to the Public Records Act and therefore disclosable, and if not, why not?
Thank you. So are there any other agenda items that you want to add? Okay, I see none. So with that, we are now going to go to announcement by the chief, but before we go to that, could I also one more time ask for the second period of calling? If you're going to make a call, please call 818-238-3335, and we'll start taking those calls after the chief's announcements. Chief, you're up.
Okay, thank you. A couple things. First item is that we're in Breast Cancer Awareness Month, an annual event for the month of October. Because of the inability to really meet with the public, we didn't have a pink vehicle or motorcycle this year, or the many events that we sponsored during the month of October. We do have the patches, and we are still a supporter of the Pink Patch Project, the proceeds of which go to the City of Hope. The next item I'd like to get to is that we're going to have a graduation from the Rio Hondo Police Academy on Thursday, November 5th. And in keeping with contemporary practices, this will be a drive-by graduation. So we have 2 graduates in that class, and apparently the chiefs are going to drive by and wave at the graduates. So that's the nature of graduations today. Next item, just to make a brief announcement, we are contracting with an outside firm to engage in both education and enforcement of wearing of masks in specific areas within the city. It's been widely publicized. There will be an additional announcement coming out probably at the end of the week, this week, in respect to certain provisions in that enforcement policy, in the manner in which we engage in education to have willing compliance. Next item I'd like to talk about is we have an election coming up. So we've been getting many calls about election security and related matters. What I will say is this. Right now there are 4 sites that are drop boxes in the city, and what we do is maintain security of those various drop boxes. And there are also 8 locations within the city of Burbank where people are voting. 7 of those locations, it's a 5-day window of voting, and one of the locations is actually for an 11-day period. So we have an understanding of what the election laws are. There has been concern expressed by some people in the community. There is a plan by the department, as there is by law enforcement throughout the country, to be prepared for any type of occurrences related to the election. There will not be a swift announcement after the national election, because that's just not possible this time around. But there will be maximum deployment, and there will certainly be eyes on to ensure that there is not voter intimidation or voter fraud. Next item I'd like to get to is one of our core missions is crime. And with COVID and the national narrative, some people have kind of forgotten about that core mission. And, I'm very happy to report that in spite of what's been going on within our society, that Part 1 crimes are down 8.9% this year to date. That includes a 19.7% reduction in violent crime and an 8.2% reduction in property crime. The number of traffic collisions has decreased 27.9%. And in respect to our responses to emergency calls for service, we're under 3 minutes. And to all calls, we're at 14 minutes and 31 seconds, which is very enviable. But I like to push that out there because we do live in a safe community. I do realize there are difficulties in respect to some people seeing eye to eye with all other people. That's a part of our core mission. We take COVID very importantly. We're very intimately involved in decoupling, defunding discussions, as are you. We're working with you. And of course, the elections are right around the corner. And that is another objective, is to ensure that we do our best. So there are no allegations of impropriety there. But with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any, this is the final period of comments. Do we have any callers? No callers with, so no response to the calls of the public. With that done, we're going to, I guess we do introduction of new agenda items for future meetings. But are there any new agenda items for future meetings? Commissioner Chapman?
More of a question here. I believe that we had discussed having the Burbank Human Relations Council give a presentation at some point. Have we scheduled that, or is that off the agendas now?
I'm not sure we did. And the other commissioners can chime in. I'm not sure if we ever formalized that or if that came up. I remember that coming up in passing, but I don't know if we ever expected a return. Chief, did we have that as a topic?
I believe so. It's not been scheduled, but I think it's appropriate. My recommendation would be to schedule it for November, because if I recall correctly, this commission's report is due back to the council in December. So we've got a November meeting and perhaps a December meeting before that report is due. And I think it is appropriate to have a presentation and involvement with the Burbank Human Relations Council.
So is that something we need to take a vote on, or are we just going to try to schedule that through staff? Or
I think it should be agendized for, my recommendation would be to agendize it for November.
Okay, well, we can, put it to the vote now to agendize it for November, Commissioner Chapman, but then I think someone's going to have to contact the Human Relations and see if they can make it during that time. Is that appropriate?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds good.
And Commissioner Chapman, can we narrow down what the focus will be of this as an agenda item? I mean, what are we looking for them to discuss? So we can put it out. Can you put it out as a request for an agenda item so we can vote on it? A motion?
Yeah, it seems like this would piggyback on our discussion this evening regarding subliminal bias there. I think that equality in how justice is processed for our citizens is probably where we want to go.
Okay, so
That
would
we're
you
getting
mind
equal justice?
putting it into a motion so that we could vote on it? A motion to, and then use your phrases there? I'll be glad to vote on it. I don't want to.
sound too eloquent there. I'm sorry. But I think that perhaps what I'd like to do is move that the Burbank Human Relations Council give a presentation, if willing to, on equal justice.
Okay.
If I could add that the police department works closely, almost on a daily basis, with the Burbank Human Relations Council, particularly in respect to hate crime in our community. So all of those crimes are not only reported to the county, but also to the state. But we immediately get in contact with the Burbank Human Relations Council so they can intervene if that's going to be necessary. So there is a close working relationship there, and we could be prepared with the individual that does that work for us to make a presentation with the council.
Okay. So we have a motion. Is Commissioner Cohen, is that a second or?
No, that's,
Okay.
when we're talking about justice, you can't just stop with the police department. There's a lot of other agencies involved. You're talking about the courts, you're talking about the prosecutors, you're talking about the appellate process. Justice is more than just what happens in the street. So maybe it needs to be phrased with regards to police as opposed to justice as a concept.
I'm sorry, Bob. I thought we were working with the police commission, and that's where my thoughts were.
No, but the cases go beyond what happens here in the street in the police department. So I don't know. Whatever, I think we need to clarify it a little bit what we're talking about. Justice is a big concept.
Commissioner Chapman, do you want to revise the motion and narrow it down to police commission related business? Commissioner,
Our discussion this evening was on bias, and we didn't have any problem with limitations on bias there.
no, the presentation we got today was on implicit bias as it relates to police officers and their training. So it was specific to us.
Right.
I think Commissioner Cohen is asking if you could rephrase that motion to where it's more focused on the police commission and the police department. Is that possible? Could you maybe narrow it down to?
I think the interaction, and I don't know if we can how much we can discuss here, but I'm thinking about the interaction between the public and our police, and the assurance that we're looking for as a community to have equal justice done there.
Okay, I'm going to hold that thought. Commissioner Vest, do you have a question?
Well, I guess also we would need to specify, are we talking about when it comes to detentions? Are we talking about when it comes to traffic stops? Are we talking about when it comes to call for service? Are we talking about, what are we, my question is kind of like we're talking about, bias policing. Are we discussing it as like in terms of like a whole? But the problem is with a whole, it's kind of widely defined when we have things like we have detentions, we have calls for service, we have arrests, we have all different types of things that kind of encompass a very large grouping. So in terms of what are we really talking about when it comes to bias policing?
So Commissioner Chapman, are you saying you want the Human Relations Committee to come and speak about implicit bias in policing and how they relate to it?
I think so.
So maybe you could rephrase it that way.
Experiencing that we're cutting out on voices here.
So maybe you could rephrase it to be specific in saying that the Human Relations Committee to do a presentation on implicit bias as related to their relationship with the police department. And I think the chief said that they work together, so that would make sense in that way if you narrow it down the focus.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so we can't really govern what they're gonna come and present on. So let's leave it up to, just say, Chief, can you reach out and see if they're willing to do a presentation? I mean, just like we've done to all the other groups, we can offer them, just like you're saying, we can offer them the venue to come and do one if they see fit.
No,
I mean, I'll even reach out as the chair and to their chair and ask if they're willing to do that as it relates to policing.
No, we'll do that. And,
Is that
and
okay?
if I may add, I think Mr. Cohen had a very good recommendation. There's something called the criminal justice system. It's just not law enforcement. But made a list here. You've got the prosecutorial agencies, the district attorney, the city attorney. You've got probation. You've got parole. You've got the courts. You've got the appellate courts. You've got corrections. You've got public defenders, alternate public defenders. But perhaps whether it's in November or December, we could do an overview of the entire criminal justice system, because law enforcement or police department is not a standalone entity within the criminal justice system. There are a myriad, as I just remarked, of different agencies that are involved in the process.
So without, because it seems like there's some confusion, I want to try to keep the focus on, what our mission is here that's related to specifically the policing in Burbank. And so maybe this doesn't need to be an agenda, maybe we have to agendize it, but maybe we don't have to have a motion for the exact language of what they present, and that's something the department can work on with Human Relations?
Well, I think if we're going to be able to talk about it, it's got to be agendized. The city attorney will
So
tell you
we'll
that.
agendize it.
So
but I mean-
what we can do is agendize an issue for the police department and the Burbank Human Relations Council to jointly present in November, if that's your choice. And that in that way, if it's agendized, we can have give and take like we were having now.
Okay, so I think that would be appropriate. Commissioners, do you want to vote on that as is, that we just we'll agendize it as an item if in the police department we'll get together with Human Relations and come up with a presentation? Because we don't want to dictate what the presentation is, obviously. Commissioner Vest?
So basically, they're just kind of go into the area that they want to go into. Because my question is, if he's concerned about a particular bias, but I'm trying to narrow down what the concern of the bias is. Is it a particular part of policing? Because there's many aspects of policing. So if we're concerned about one or all, or because that's a pretty wide umbrella, pretty big net to cast for somebody to kind of come in and give a presentation on. But if that's what we want to just leave it up to them to do what they want to do, that's fine. But it seems like if there's a particular path we're going down, we could narrow it down for them.
Yeah, I was hoping to narrow it down, but I think if we just leave it up to them, I think they can come up with an appropriate thing. Commissioners, do you want to take a vote on that? Does everybody approve? We should do by consensus here. I see everybody approving. Let's move on to the next item. In any other items from any other commissioners? Okay, I have one request. Again, because we said from the beginning we wanted to give every group an opportunity. Anybody that wants to speak can speak, and I'll just throw this out there that, because a lot of these issues that we're talking about relate to the police department and police personnel, and we've covered some of the POBAR restrictions, and the chief's talked a lot about the transparency and the limited amount of transparency we can have when it comes to employees. I wanted to give the opportunity to the Burbank Police Officers Association, if they wanted to make a presentation as well, based on all of our recommendations, or before we make a final recommendation, if that's something the commission would consider. I see Commissioner Cohen. Commissioner Cohen?
I think it's always good to have the BPOA come and voice their position. I mean, on anything we're talking about that affects them.
Okay, so we'll, Commissioner Vest.
I agree, because they're the ones that are actually field dealing with particular issues. We should hear from them and what they have to say about the things that lay people stand up here and try to discuss.
Okay, so I can see here, just, we're going to put that on the agenda. I can see by consensus, everybody's shaking their head yes. Do we have anybody that would, be against having the BPOA make a presentation in response to all the recommendations? Anybody? Seeing none, that motion carries also. And with no other additional items, we will adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. With that said, meeting adjourned.